Welcome to Decoding Healthcare Research. I'm Efrain Riveros, Dr. E.F. Rain. I'm an associate professor of anesthesiology at the Medical College of Georgia in the United States. And today we are going to be discussing vitamin D, but vitamin D in the context of the extraskeletal physiology. Specifically, we will talk about insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes. And for that reason, we have an expert here. We have the honor of having Dr. Izabela Szymczak-Pajor. She's a researcher at the Department of Nucleic Acid Biochemistry, Medical University of Łódź in Poland. So welcome, Dr. Szymczak.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us today. So we have been discussing insulin resistance, chronic inflammation in the context of disease, not only diabetes mellitus, but even cancer and other metabolic diseases not necessarily related to diabetes. So we think that anything that affects the insulin resistance is worth exploring. And you mentioned in your paper that vitamin D is one of those strategies, and vitamin D is one of those links in the chain of disease associated with insulin resistance. So first of all, I want to ask you, Dr. Szymczak, so what sparked your interest in doing research about vitamin D?
Frankly speaking, there are several reasons that inspired me to study the relationship between vitamin D deficiency and insulin resistance. First of all, we live in a temperate climate where the intensity of solar radiation is low and favors the development of vitamin D deficiency by reducing its endogenous synthesis in the skin. Thus, latitude, season, and the time of day are the geographical factor, significantly affecting the volume of UVB photons that reach the Earth accordingly to the zenith angle of the Sun. Latitude higher than 35 degrees, the season from November to March, morning and late afternoon, as well as low position of the Sun on the horizon, unrelated to lower UVB index and decreased production of vitamin D in the skin. Secondly, our lifestyle also favors the development of vitamin D deficiency. So type of diet, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, indoor workplace, and the usage of sunscreen, sun oils also significantly decrease the level of vitamin D in the human body. And thirdly, epidemiological data indicate that people over 45 years of age have a higher incidence of the obesity, diabetes, and metabolic disorders. Moreover, vitamin D deficiency accelerates the development of these metabolic disorders, including insulin resistance. And since vitamin D has a pleiotropic effect, it seems reasonable to check the relationship between vitamin D deficiency and insulin resistance. Thus, I checked what molecular mechanisms are responsible for the relationship between vitamin D deficiency and insulin resistance.
I see, and I think it's important, even before we explore that link, I think it's important for our audience to understand what happens with vitamin D once it is produced, either from the skin or from dietary sources or supplements. What happens inside our body with vitamin D?
While reviewing scientific evidence, I found numerous clinical studies showing that vitamin D supplementation reduces the level of metabolic parameters such as total cholesterol, low density lipoprotein, triglycerides, glycated hemoglobin, as well as decreases insulin resistance indicator in type 2 diabetes patients. Based on this observation, we also decided to conduct a clinical trial. The aim of our study was to determine the effect of vitamin D supplementation on DNA damage and metabolic parameters in people over 45 years of age suffering from dysglycemia or dyslipidemia and vitamin D deficiency. To the study, 92 people with vitamin D deficiency were enrolled. These people were randomly assigned to two groups: an intervention group. Participants were supplemented with vitamin D, and a comparison group without vitamin D supplementation. We administered cholecalciferol to the intervention group at a dose of 2,000 international units per day for 3 months, from October to March. The results of our study have shown that 3 months vitamin D supplementation increased the mean vitamin D concentration to generally accepted physiological level and independently of type 2 diabetes presence. Importantly, vitamin D exposure decreased the level of oxidative DNA damage in lymphocytes of patients of intervention group. Among studied metabolic parameters, vitamin D markedly increased high-density lipoprotein cholesterol level, decreased homeostatic model assessment insulin resistance, triglyceride high-density lipoprotein cholesterol ratio also, and we also found that glycated hemoglobin percentage diminished about 0.5% in type 2 diabetes patients supplemented with vitamin D. Thus, daily 2,000 international units intake of vitamin D for 3 months decreased the level of oxidative DNA damage, which are a marker of oxidative stress, independently of type 2 diabetes presence. Furthermore, vitamin D reduced metabolic parameters connected with insulin resistance and improved glucose and lipid metabolism. Therefore, our results supported the assertion that vitamin D, by reducing oxidative stress and improving of metabolic profile, may decrease insulin resistance and related disease. Also, based on the result we obtain, which are consistent with the result of other researchers, I decided to find out what molecular mechanisms with vitamin effects contribute to the results we observed.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see that that you are definitely defining a link between vitamin D and insulin resistance, and that's absolutely clear. Now, I want you to tell us at what different levels are those mechanisms happening. Is it happening in the muscle, adipose tissue, pancreas, liver, or in all of them? And what are the specifics?
The specifics. Okay, linking vitamin D deficiency and insulin resistance. There is mounting evidence that vitamin D deficiency is now a worldwide health problem. In addition, an alarming number of diseases connected with vitamin D deficiency, such as obesity and type 2 diabetes mellitus, are observed. Both clinical and basic studies demonstrated that majority of common characteristics of this disease result from defect in insulin signaling, systemic inflammation, and pancreatic beta cell dysfunction. The results of numerous observational studies revealed that hypovitaminosis D favors the development of insulin resistance, since serum vitamin D levels correlated with the values of metabolic parameters, including body mass index, homeostatic model assessment insulin resistance, triglycerides, high-density lipoprotein cholesterol, low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, total cholesterol, and glycated hemoglobin. Vitamin D deficiency is also associated with impaired secretion of insulin by pancreatic beta cells and insulin signaling. In turn, supplementation may improve metabolic parameters associated with insulin resistance, and on the molecular level, both genomic and non-genomic molecular action of vitamin D are involved in the maintenance of insulin sensitivity. On the one hand, these favorable effects is related directly to insulin signaling by enhancement of insulin secretion and ensuring the responsiveness of target cells to insulin by enhancing the translocation of glucose for transporter to cell membranes. On the other hand, vitamin D maintenance of insulin sensitivity by its antioxidant properties, leading to reduction of oxidative stress and through its anti-inflammatory properties also. Taken together, the results of basic and clinical studies revealed that vitamin D deficiency is a crucial factor that may accelerate insulin resistance formation. In turn, vitamin D supplementation may inhibit or delay the development of this process.
So what you mean is that the effects of vitamin D are like everywhere, right? So it's working in pancreas, in liver, in the adipose tissue. I want to center on the adipose tissue. So considering that vitamin D is a liposoluble vitamin, and it dissolves or is compatible with the adipose tissue, what happens inside the adipose tissue with vitamin D?
In adipose tissue, frankly speaking, vitamin D ensures normal function of adipose tissue. It regulates lipid metabolism in adipose tissue via, for example, effects on lipolysis and lipogenesis. Lipolysis is an enzymatic process of hydrolytic decomposition of triacylglycerols, taking place with the participation of lipases in adipose tissue, leading to the formation of fatty acid and glycerol. In turn, lipogenesis is an anabolic esterification process involving the synthesis of triacylglycerols using fatty acids. Interestingly, some scientific data presents that the effect of vitamin D on lipolysis and lipogenesis depends on the type of adipose tissue and the origin of adipocytes, so the localization of adipocytes. Vitamin D stimulates lipolysis in visceral adipose tissue, but inhibits this process in subcutaneous tissue. Similarly, vitamin D stimulates lipogenesis in subcutaneous tissue, but inhibits it in visceral adipose tissue. It is worth emphasizing that visceral adipose tissue is related to development of obesity. The next mechanism, vitamin D also exerts an effect on expression of genes engaged in adipogenesis. However, the results of studies focus on its influence on adipogenesis are, frankly speaking, still inconsistent. And finally, vitamin D decreases low-grade chronic inflammation, coexisting with insulin resistance. Anti-inflammatory properties of vitamin D are driven by the reduction of adipocytokine production. Vitamin D inhibits the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So, for example, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 6, or C-reactive protein. The bioactive form of vitamin D, calcitriol, strongly suppresses the activation of nuclear factor kappa beta and mitogen-activated protein kinases signaling pathways, preventing transcription of pro-inflammatory genes. Thus, calcitriols, the active form of vitamin D, significantly reduces the inflammation in adipose tissue.
I see. And and you mentioned something important, and is that it affects genes and the epigenome, all this epigenetic part. So what happens? How does vitamin D work in that regard? I saw that you mentioned something about sirtuins and how they can affect methylation of DNA. What is exactly happening there?
Frankly speaking, this mechanism is not fully known. Because still the researcher carried out an experiment on this process. So in our article, we only mention about this process. However, this is the still important aspects which is still studied. Yes. The most important mechanism in case of insulin's resistance and vitamin D deficiency is also related with the impact of vitamin D on insulin signaling and insulin sensitivity. Yes. Frankly speaking, I will explain the most important mechanism by which vitamin D affects insulin signaling and sensitivity.
I see.
Firstly, vitamin D from its genomic mechanism of action regulates the expression of insulin gene, because vitamin D response element was identified in the promoter of insulin gene in the pancreatic beta cells. Thus, this active form of vitamin D, calcitriol, may directly stimulate secretion of insulin on the molecular level. And secondly, vitamin D participates in insulin secretion process by pancreatic beta cells. It regulates intracellular calcium concentration. It is a very important mechanism. Why? Insulin is a hormone secreted by and stored in cytoplasmic secretory vesicles. It relays from cytoplasmic secretory vesicles depends on the presence of calcium ions. In this case, rapid non-genomic calcitriol action was found to be responsible for the increase of cytoplasmic calcium level that activates exocytosis of insulin in the pancreatic beta cells. Thirdly, also the action of vitamin D in the reduction of insulin resistance in target tissue is also associated with the regulation of this intracellular calcium level, because increased calcium concentration also enhanced translocation of glucose 4 transporter to the cell membrane, and glucose uptake is increased. And the next mechanism, vitamin D has been shown that increased insulin sensitivity via induction also of insulin receptor expression on target cells. So elevated expression of insulin receptor genes maintains proper insulin signaling pathways and also insulin sensitivity. And the last mechanism which I proposed is related with reactive oxygen species coexisting with insulin resistance. So elevated level of reactive oxygen species decreases the activity of the insulin signaling pathways via serine-threonine phosphorylation of insulin receptor substrate, reduced of glucose transporter gene transcription, disturbances of insulin signaling redistribution in cells, and alteration of mitochondrial activity. And here, vitamin D might also reduce formation of this reactive oxygen species in also adipocyte or pancreatic beta cells by controlling of cellular antioxidant expression, such as, for example, superoxide dismutase, glutathione, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, and glutathione reductase. So the most important mechanism.
So it's an antioxidant and also increases the production of insulin at the genetic and molecular level. And on top of that, is able to improve insulin sensitivity at the peripheral tissues. And on top of that, it works at the adipose tissue level. So it's central, I would say, in the development of diabetes mellitus. So my next question is, having all this information, do you think that vitamin D should be included as part of the treatment of diabetes mellitus and patients with pre-diabetes?
Yes, in my opinion, it's a very important aspect because vitamin D supplementation may improve major metabolic parameters associated with insulin resistance, especially increases level of high-density lipoprotein cholesterol and decreases the level of, for example, triglycerides. Although the results are still not conclusive, there are many studies indicated that vitamin D may delay or reduce the risk of development of diabetes and therefore may also delay or reduce the risk of diabetes complication. Poorly managed diabetes can lead to chronic imbalance in the body and the functioning of various systems, and consequently to the failure of many organs, including heart, blood, vessels, kidney, nervous system, also very important. Failure of these systems and organs ultimately leads to the death. Therefore, proper management of diabetes, in my opinion, in which vitamin D may also play a role, can help to delay, reduce the risk of developing this diabetes and diabetes-related complications, and may extend life.
And also may extend life, yeah, because as you mentioned, there is a process of inflammation that is there not only in diabetes but in the aging process and also in other diseases. So probably the use of vitamin D, given that it's a very safe supplement, is probably indicated, and we should probably recommend people to take it under these conditions, right?
Yes, the people in this condition, and also, in my opinion, on the one hand, also vitamin D is derivative of cholesterol, yes? And for example, statins inhibit cholesterol synthesis. But patient taking a statin could certainly benefit from the vitamin D supplementation. And also, in my opinion, the special benefits of vitamin D supplementation can be also obtained by people living in a climate like ours. People living in a moderate climate in large cities with a sedentary lifestyle posed by, for example, weight, are particularly exposed to the risk of developing vitamin D deficiency and related disorders.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we close, what do you think are still the knowledge gaps, and where should research focus its efforts to try to understand better what is going on? What comes next in terms of research?
My research.
Yes.
Okay. So, frankly speaking, my attention and the next scientific target is the issue of vitamin D deficiency in obese people. Why? This issue is a complicated scientific problem due to several reasons. Some literature data, but not all, showed that both obesity contributes to low level of vitamin D deficiency and low vitamin D that contributes to some literature data, but not all showed that both obesity contributes to low vitamin D levels and low vitamin D levels lead to obesity. The answers to the question why obesity contributes to vitamin D deficiency include the sequestration of vitamin D and adipose tissue and its volumetric dilution. Volumetric dilution indicates that with increasing body weight, the dilution of vitamin D and adipose tissue increases, and consequently, its level in serum decreases. Therefore, vitamin D is trapped in fatty tissue and unable to function. How to release this vitamin D from fat tissue? And the next, conversely, why low vitamin D level lead to the obesity? As I mentioned earlier, some literature data indicate that the effect of vitamin D on lipolysis and lipogenesis depends on the type of adipose tissue and the origin as well as the localization of adipocytes, yes? Vitamin D stimulates lipolysis in tissue, but inhibits processing in subcutaneous tissue. And similarly, vitamin D stimulates lipogenesis in subcutaneous tissue, but inhibits it in vitro. Certainly, local research will answer a number of troubling questions regarding the relationship between vitamin D deficiency and obesity, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting what you mentioned that the relationship between vitamin D and diabetes, and obesity can be in both directions, right? The obesity causing deficiency, the deficiency causing obesity. And it's like a vicious cycle that probably you are able to break with supplementation and obviously lifestyle changes that affect obesity at the same time. And I think that's a very important message. And I want to close by saying thank you, Dr. Szymczak, for being with us today and sharing your knowledge. The research that you are doing is very important and is definitely shedding light on this complex problem of obesity, especially nowadays that a high percentage of the population has low levels of vitamin D. So this may be a significant contributing factor to the epidemics of diabetes. And I think anything that can be researched in this regard is definitely valuable, and I appreciate that. I want to thank you, and for our audience, you will find the link of this paper and also information about the clinical trial that Dr. Szymczak was mentioning at the beginning, and all the information about all her research. Don't forget to leave us your comments and feedback in the comment section, and see you in the next episode of Decoding Healthcare Research. Thank you very much.